All of this is really powerful, and it really is tremendous to be able to be a great partner because of the fact that it takes you choosing to show up as a partner every single day and make sure that your partner doesn't have the entire household on their back.
If a company's running really well, it means the CEO is doing a good job, not a bad job. So if they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off, trust me, they're a bad CEO. Making it look easy is actually part of the problem.
Conscious couples, business partners, and individuals, welcome to the Conscious Couples podcast, where we share our life, love story, and relationship expertise to help you consistently cultivate the most magnificent relationship possible.
Never again will you feel hopeless and alone in your intimate relationship challenges. We'll help you have the courage to be your authentic self, communicate effectively, and constructively resolve conflict.
Having accumulated thousands of hours coaching, speaking, podcasting, and hosting live events with conscious couples all over the world, Alan and I are here to guide you in all things relationships.
Thank you again for tuning into the one place where it's not about you or me, it's about the we. Conscious couples and individuals, welcome back to another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. Today we have episode 227, Are You Carrying the Weight of Your Entire Household? Today we're going to be talking about fair play, cognitive labor. Before we jump into this episode, this is something that, statistically speaking, women deal with a ton. So for you, love, ladies first, what is your intention?
My intention for our listeners is to have a dialogue around what is known as invisible labor and break down one little tidbit for our conscious couples to be able to take away with them into their relationships so that women aren't consistently burdened and burnt out, leading to disconnects in relationships.
I had a client who has 2 children. And he is the primary breadwinner, and he called his wife, I've told you this, the CEO of the household.
Love that.
And I loved that because he understands that he is freed up to be the CEO in his career, and she's the CEO of the household. And I thought that was a really cool thing. Now, one thing that I didn't talk to you about before we hit record that I wanted to mention on this episode is when you mention invisible labor, I don't know if you know this, love, I think you probably do. You're a CEO of your company. I'm a CEO of my company. A lot of people think CEOs do very little.
Yeah.
Okay, so you laugh because you're a CEO.
Right.
I just got off with a CEO earlier on a coaching session, and I said, does your team actually know what you do? And he's like, no. I said, here's the thing. Do you ever communicate with them how challenging your life actually is? When you mention invisible labor, have you ever heard the saying, I remember I was working at iRobot and one of my teammates said, oh, the CEO, and I knew the CEO at the time. The CEO, yeah, everyone rises to their level of incompetence. And I was like, whoa, so you think you could do the CEO's job? Interesting, I see you're very humble. And that's not true at all. But what I've realized over the years is that this invisible labor, this cognitive labor, the CEO is doing cognitive labor 24/7, 365. When you wake up thinking about it, you go to bed thinking about it. It's very hard to shut this off. And a lot of the work that a CEO does is thinking and strategically planning and being proactive, and it's invisible work behind the scenes. The same is true in a household with the CEO of the household. So I know a lot of you out there listening or watching this feel like the CEO of the household, but you're not getting CEO benefits. You're not getting the CEO compensation. Because at least when you're a CEO, typically, not always, you're getting compensated for that. So if you feel like the CEO of the household and you're not getting that Skrilla, no, I'm being playful. Yeah, you're not getting, honestly, you feel unseen, unappreciated, undervalued, spread too thin, and struggling, and that's why we're doing this episode, and you wanted to do it.
So I'm really grateful we're doing this episode. We're going to consistently talk about this on this podcast because the numbers consistently show that this is an underrepresented conversation, meaning people aren't having dialogues around this enough, because if that were the case, conversations would turn into action, which would decrease the statistics that we're seeing. So we're doing our part. We're going to continuously do our part and help our conscious couples do better in this, because honestly, no one teaches what we're about to talk about in this episode. So first question, I have 2 fingers because I have 2 questions and I don't put them down until I ask them. So my first question to you, Love, on this topic of the CEO of the household, what does CEO actually stand for?
Chief Executive Officer.
Okay, meaning the person who is doing what?
Thinking the most. So prefrontal cortex is the executive function of the human brain, and the chief executive officer, metaphorically, is the prefrontal cortex of the company.
In a household, people who identify as the CEO of their household, in other words, the person that's listening to this who is self-identifying as, I am carrying the entire household on my back, would you also say that they're also not just doing that prefrontal cortex work, but also the actual execution, which is the little e in CEO? A lot of the execution that is in fact invisible.
Yes, because so I'm a CEO of Next Level University, the company, and we didn't plan on this, by the way. This is totally off the cuff, but I love this conversation.
Me too. It's like a blend of business and truly what, in order to run a household, there are so many overlaps.
It's so important because a household is supposed to be an organization. So I have a 24-person team, and Kevin, my business partner, is the chief sales officer. I have a chief operations officer, and I lead the entire team of the 24 people, but not necessarily directly. So Kevin has, I think, 7 direct reports. Ron is a team leader. She has 11 direct reports. So, but the point is that of this is the CEO of the household doesn't have a team. And they certainly don't have a team that they pay, or maybe they do have a team that they pay, but they're not. One of my clients has 4 children. They each have chores, and they have a chore board. So I hope the frame of this helps people identify who is doing the cognitive labor that's invisible, and then who is actually executing against that. And at the end of the day, and this is the hypothetical question I wanted to ask, is one time Kevin and I got in a mini argument. He said, I think I could do what you do. And I was like, really? That's interesting. And he's like, for like a day. And I was like, oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, and even that, I'm not sure. I'm joking, Kev. But anyone can do it for a day. But the thing that is funny about that and why you laugh is most of what I do is not seen. Most of what I do is behind the scenes. This podcast episode right now is, I'm 37, you're 31, a combined 68 years of cumulative learning condensed into one episode.
Right.
It's not like we just prepped for this and then that's done. And the truth of the matter is, as scary as this is to hear for certain people, is there are certain people who couldn't even do this podcast episode because they don't have the years and decades of experience speaking, podcasting, coaching, training, understanding, synthesizing, communicating. I can keep going. But back to the point of this episode is, if you are the CEO of the household and you have all these unconscious competencies and you're doing all this invisible labor and cognitive labor, as the CEO of NLU, everyone knows I'm the CEO, everyone knows that I'm leading, and I have all these people I can delegate to. And they're willing and able to do it. And they know that I'm their quote-unquote boss. I like leader. Right. But at home, if it's not clear who the boss is or who the leader is, then how do you delegate? And so that's your point, I think, is these, particularly women, what percentage of women, let's go to the stats so that I don't just seem like we're bashing men here. At the end of the day, I just want to understand the stats of cognitive labor. What percentage do the stats show of women versus men in cognitive labor in the household?
So there's a lot of words and terminology that I want to create a distinguishing component to, but specifically when we're talking about cognitive labor, women 72%, men 28%.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. So 70, we'll call it 70-30.
Is very much
50-50.
50-50. Yeah. Oh, I take care of 50% of the households, the quote unquote cognitive labor.
And so there's a documentary called Fair Play. It's also based on a book. And we used this documentary in one of our relationship talks events, and we gave credit to the person who did it. And we highly recommend it.
We'll
Fair
put the
Play.
link in the show notes
Yes,
too.
Fair Play documentary was recommended to me. I coached a couple, male and female. They both run a business together and a household. They both have 2 children, different couple. And they recommended Fair Play. The female recommended Fair Play.
Nice.
Makes sense. And at the end of the day, take up all the responsibilities of the future success of the family, financially, health-wise, household, you name it, and try to get as close to 50% as you can. And then if you want to take this one step further, ideally what you would do is align the responsibilities that are necessary to create the future you want with core competencies and fulfillment. So for example, you hate dishes, I don't mind them, I'll do them, okay? That was earlier. Obviously, we've come a long way since then, but there's a lot of those.
Yep.
And when you and I do combine finances and progress and get married and all that stuff, I have no problem doing the finances. I know you don't either. You have no problem with it either, but we need to take your gifting and your fulfillment and combine them, make a love child, and then align the responsibilities of the household with what's actually fulfilling. If you loved cutting grass, for whatever reason, you don't, but if you did, I would have you do that, because I am not interested. Cut the greens.
Right.
So everyone can do this, but it never gets done because it's not run like an organization. And that's why you and I resonate so deeply with organizational design and business, because there's actual structure and the expectations are there. And that's why I loved the CEO of the household thing. And that's why you loved it when I shared that with you, because that is the right frame. Because if she's the CEO of the household, he is going to support and allow her to execute as the prefrontal cortex of the house.
Facts.
And a household could and should be run like a goddamn boot camp. I'm joking. No, but it should be run like a company, like an organization.
Yeah. So I had a marathon client yesterday that I was on for 2 hours with. And prior to that, I was on with my executive assistant, and he had asked me, like, what do you have to do to prepare for something like that? It's a lot of mental effort, cognitive labor, and there's a lot of mind work that you're doing in that. I'm like, absolutely. He said, I think I read somewhere, it's like when you're doing just 1 hour of what you do, it's like running a marathon for your brain.
Yes.
Twice. And I didn't look that up and research that. So stay tuned for that. But why I mentioned that is because and that was a CEO with a CEO.
EA looked that up?
Yeah. Awesome. I thought that was awesome.
Way to go, Isaac.
So it was a CEO and a CEO for 2 hours. And it's a lot of mental stimulation and conversations and talking about different domains and strategy. And why I mention that is because I feel like it's very easy for us to think about that in terms of a business setting. However, when we actually start to bring the business concept into an intimate relationship per the household, quote unquote, on your back, we tend to forget how much and how many calories we're burning when our brain is going to work. And that's where I want to draw a distinction between what we referred to earlier as invisible work or invisible labor and cognitive labor. When we talk about this conversation, I have written down here on my Remarkable, this is the last frontier of domestic inequality. So partners, why you're interested in this is because likely what you're experiencing is the symptom.
What is domestic inequality?
So domestic inequality is essentially a
women are
partnership.
expected to work now.
Yep.
And take care of the family.
And
so
take
there's
care
a
of
huge inequality with men and women in labor around the household, even though women are now expected to work in Western culture.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And all over the world. Really.
Yeah, all over the world.
Yep.
Right. So why I think that that's a really important element to draw a distinction between, because the invisible labor are the things that are being done literally every single day by mostly women that men will not see. An example of this that just happened before this podcast, Alan has invisible labor that he does all the time for this podcast to be what it is. Before we got started, my lapel is never secured where it needs to be, and I suck at that. And he has a higher standard when it comes to the audio quality of this show so that you all can hear really the quality and the content that we're saying here. And the invisible labor that he did was putting the lapel where it needs to be so that there's not material in between. But you as a listener, you would never know that. Mm-hmm. That would be invisible labor that he has.
As a matter of fact, if you did know that, that means it's not being done well.
Right.
So when you go to the movies, this is a great metaphor. When you go to the movies, The making of the film was an absolute shit show, but the film itself was a magnificent masterpiece.
Right.
Every scene, every cut. And I used to
love that.
coach an editor. He did feature films.
Yeah.
You saw the feature film. And Emilia wasn't a fan. But anyways, the edits behind the scenes were wild.
Right.
But that's kind of a good metaphor of if the audience is worried about the sound quality of the film, obviously there was an issue. And so the making of the film is a 12-month process, sometimes more. But the watching of the movie is only 2.5 hours. I think that's a good metaphor.
I love it.
It's
I think it's
women are doing the making of the film.
Yep.
And when everything's running smoothly, it's also because they're doing a good job, not a bad job. And sometimes, and I think that's one of the reasons why the CEOs, and not all CEOs are good. I'm not, that's not what I'm about. But people who think CEOs are lazy, it's like, no. If a company's running really well, it means the CEO is doing a good job, not a bad job. So if they're running around like a chicken with their head cut off, trust me, they're a bad CEO. So at the end of the day, making it look easy is actually part of the problem. And so a lot of women in the household that make it look easy. I was on with a client not 3 days ago, last week, 4 days ago. What's today, Tuesday? Wednesday. Okay, it was more than that. I think it was Saturday, so 5 days ago. Anyways, she was at work on a Saturday with a baby.
Yep.
While working with a customer, while on a Zoom with me. And she was frustrated that people don't see what it takes.
And more often than not, this is the common joke when mom leaves or goes on a vacation or goes on a trip with her friends or whatever. That's where all things start to break down.
They crumble.
Why? Because all the invisible labor that she has been doing is no longer being done. Why? Because dad or partner doesn't really know what to do, how to do it, and has just been kind of showing up, enjoying the fruits of her invisible labor. So the distinction between invisible labor are the things that more often than not, again, 72% of women, 28% of men, women are doing without any credit, without anyone knowing or tracking. So the difference between invisible labor and cognitive labor that we're talking about, why you feel like the household is on your back, is because not only are you doing the E, the CEO, the
All
little
cognitive labor is invisible labor.
Truth.
But there's some invisible labor that is being done that no one's seeing that's also invisible labor. Is that fair?
Absolutely. But that's where I love the distinction between the capital CEO and capital with lowercase e, because little e is execution, which is the invisible labor itself. The cognitive labor is
E,
that's
function.
the big E, which is executive functioning, which we're going to break that down into 3 different domains, or we'll break the invisible labor down into 3 different domains: cognitive labor, physical, domestic, and daily repetitive tasks. So the difference between that, cognitive labor is what we're talking about, which is the mental strategy, simulation. We're going to break that down into specifically 4 buckets for us to understand in this episode.
Okay.
The physical domestic is the
laundry dishes,
tracking work, like laundry dishes, but the daily repetitive is more along the lines of the tracking, the making sure that there's execution and every single step is done. So there's a lot in here, but the cognitive labor is what is contributing to the burnout more than ever. Obviously, the invisible labor too, but there's no division in this cognitive labor. So women, what ends up happening is women in relationships end up having to be forced into this employer and employee role. So it shifts the power dynamic in the relationship.
And then they don't take care of themselves.
And
now they're pouring from an empty cup. And it gets worse and worse and worse over time. Instead of taking care of themselves, investing in themselves, delegating effectively. Yep. And you mentioned this in the last episode that we did, episode 226. Emilia said that if you are direct in what you need, you come off as a bitch.
Right.
Okay? I'm not a woman, so I don't know, but I do think that that's true. And I guess I'm encouraging that. Honestly, I think if you actually are an entitled, arrogant B-word, then I'm not encouraging that. Because there are some spoiled brats out there that this does not apply to.
Absolutely.
But if you are self-imposed servitude to thankless people, you feel unseen, undervalued, unappreciated, and you actually aren't a victim, you are really like doing a ton, then it's really important that you ask for what you need and get clear on this at the end of the day. So if your partner, your counterpart, male or female, is a mature adult that wants to take on 50%, then this is going to go very well. If they are an emotionally immature child who hasn't grown up and who is dependent on you doing everything, then they're going to react very negatively.
Facts.
That's for you to deal with, not me. I'm just a podcaster.
That's where relationship talks coaching comes in, because we have worked with couples where they really resonate with an episode, a conversation like this, and then all of a sudden they realize there's a huge inequity when it comes to the actual distribution of invisible labor and cognitive labor in the household. And so the how, right, like we're not going to expect you to learn how to do that in the flip of a switch, because what you just referred to, love, is deeply embedded beliefs about gender roles and socialization around what we as couples believe is the quote unquote predominant thing that we need to do when we start to share a household and have a family and have kids together and all that stuff. And so a lot of that is undoing a lot of the wiring and mental infrastructure that's there to be able to actually consider and reevaluate, is 50-50 what we want, or do we want to do 100-100? That's a little bit of a different perspective.
We should do an episode on that.
Which we absolutely will. So let's kind of break this down into 4, like I said, cognitive labor, 4 different buckets that you and I both have an example for, which is where cognitive labor breaks down and really puts on that burden with women that end up not getting well resourced, not great sleep, not great nutrition, et cetera, but then have that expectation to go to work, raise the child, do the household stuff, et cetera. Okay.
So these are the 4 stages of cognitive labor.
Yes. So the 4 stages of cognitive labor. Number 1 is anticipating. So the example that we have here is related to protein bars. It's pretty simple.
Can you use let's use the ones up there.
Yeah.
Let's use those.
Okay, so instead of protein bars, let's
noticing that a child will outgrow winter boots in 2 months. Okay, that's anticipation.
Yep.
Number 2, identifying. Do you want to do
no,
it?
Please.
Okay.
You can.
Identifying, researching the best brands, pricing, and availability for said winter boots.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Deciding. This is usually equally shared because a lot of times I think men don't want to be out of the loop, or maybe...
I think that's a projection.
Okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell me. Why is this equally shared?
So I think...
Because women want to be a team?
Women want to be a team, but then there's also a financial component here.
Yeah, fair.
Women in dynamics like these feel as though they need to get permission, a stamp of approval, before they actually purchase what might be best for their children, because it might not, quote unquote, be within the budget.
Whoa.
There's a lot underneath that.
And then monitoring.
Right.
I'm going to need you to read that.
So women are disproportionately dominating this end, because what they're doing, let's say same thing, winter boots, they're going to track the shipment. They're going to ensure that they fit on the child. And if they don't fit, they're going to make sure that they follow up and return and make sure that they get the money back and all that stuff, which is a ton of little micro invisible labor tasks.
And again, we need this to be clear. I have to jump in. So seeing you fixing the gutters would be as weird traditionally as seeing me in the kitchen. The point of the Conscious Couples podcast is throw all that out, right? Throw all that out. You cut the grass, I'll do the kitchen.
Whatever.
The point is create your own rule book. That's what we're trying to say.
We love that.
And I actually, you said 100-100. I think we confuse people. I actually do think if you take the entire pie of responsibility for the future of your family and your finances, I would like to split it in 50-50 to the best of our abilities, and then match it to both consciousness capabilities and desire.
I think competency needs to be in the equation there.
That's what I meant. That's what
capabilities.
Unconscious competencies is what I was trying to get to. But yeah, capabilities needs to be part of it.
Yeah.
So if I'm more capable than you in a certain arena, let's give me more of that stuff.
Right.
However, if you want to come up in that arena, we need to give you the responsibility, because the part of this that we haven't talked about yet, and we got to get out of here, is the more responsibility you take on, if it's within your challenge skills sweet spot, it actually does make you really better, which then compounds into a problem later, love, because I've had clients in the past where the woman's good at everything, the man's bad at everything, except for maybe making money or whatever.
That's where learned helplessness and enablement
comes in. And now all of a sudden, when the woman does go on vacation, everything's a nightmare.
She's
so
not
now
actually
she doesn't
restoring.
Exactly.
She's
she's on
checking
the
her phone
the whole
because
time.
he's like, where do we get our blueberries from?
Exactly. Okay, so first of all, for anyone out there watching or listening to this, what is the shared responsibility for your future with your partner? And if you're in a serious, committed relationship, it's called partner for a reason. Partner. I told Kev this. You're my business partner. I'm working 6 days a week, every week, 7 days actually, believe it or not, but I'm front facing for 6.
Right.
I can't have you golfing every Tuesday. Like, unless you don't want to be a business partner.
Right.
Do you want to be an employee instead of a business partner? So the point is partner implies partnership, and partnership means shared responsibility. And so at the end of the day, before we get out of here, identify what the pie is. If it's 70-30, and most likely if it is 70-30, your partner probably thinks it's 50-50 because there's all this invisible work or cognitive labor being done that isn't being talked about.
Yes. The last layer that I would throw into here is women, what I've heard from our clients is that they'll go through their cycle and there are certain days where they actually cannot like their capacity is limited as a result of their biology.
Which cycle is that?
It really depends on the person, but menstruation phase is usually when it's the inner winter, right? And you're completely depleted of resources. And so if there's not a game plan for each different phase of your cycle and your partner has no awareness to that, and let's say you have a couple of kids, like your capacity is actually hindered more than most phases. And unless you have a game plan to make sure that you have great sleep and great nutrition and supporting to get ahead on that, then, that level of rigidity of the 50-50, it needs to be able to flow with you as a couple, not just in the 24-hour cycle of a male's hormonal clock, but also within a 28-day cycle of a female's hormonal clock. And so all of this is really powerful, and it really is tremendous to be able to be a great partner because of the fact that it takes you choosing to show up as a partner every single day and make sure that your partner doesn't have the entire household on their back. And that's where the word conscientiousness comes in. And you and I are going to do another episode on conscientiousness and what it takes to be a
One of my favorite words of all time.
It's beautiful.
It's so important.
Yeah.
What's conscientiousness?
To have, or consideration, to have consideration for your partner. Both of those words.
Thoughtful, considerate, conscientious, all three of those.
All those. I think that's a really beautiful triad.
And you and I talked on our walk last night, and you do believe that, and so do I, that women, statistically speaking, tend to be more considerate and thoughtful.
Yes.
I had a client who the dog barges in when the woman had almost no sleep. She was up with the baby all night. And it's just like, what?
Right.
What?
Woof.
So I have another client, female, and she gets 4.5 hours of sleep a night. And I said, listen, no client of mine.
Hell no.
No. You can't operate optimally on 4.5 hours of sleep.
Your brain is shutting down.
Yes,
your nervous system is shutting down.
Sleep, hydration, nutrition. So we've done episodes on that stuff. There is no, it's a win-win or it's a lose.
Facts.
Because a win-lose is never going to work long-term. And everyone out there, identify if you're in a win-win scenario. And if you're not, make a change. It's game time. We're here to change. We're here to transform.
We're here to
anything
be
you want to add before we go?
better partners and make sure that your partner doesn't have the whole household on their back. Because let's just be real, that starts to leak into the bedroom. That starts to leak into all the areas that you want to have deeper intimacy and connection on. And,
you created we did an event on the top 3 things women struggle with. And you created a quote that said, you don't lose her when she's angry. You lose her when she loses the capacity to care.
Beautiful.
And she loses the capacity to care when she's taking on the weight of the world. And some of that might be on her.
100%.
Who is not saying no. I have
Ladies,
one client.
we gotta get together. Being okay with being a bitch.
And saying no.
That's really hard for women. Being okay as being perceived as a bitch. That's really hard as women.
Yes.
Trust me, I get it. And your longevity, like everyone is benefiting off of you taking care of everything. Like you need to benefit from you being an assertive woman.
And the people that get upset with you when you set a boundary are the people benefiting from you not having them.
Facts.
I have a client who is tracking the amount of times she says no.
Hey.
And to herself too, because she shops.
Let's go.
Yeah, she's got like 25 already.
That's
It's been
awesome.
1 week.
Hey,
so
huge.
those are 25 dumb choices you would have made. Track saying no. If you are someone who loves to give, and you're a giver at heart, we love you, we see you, trust me, track how many times you say no.
Yeah.
And you don't have to say no F you can say no thank you,
Yeah.
right?
One thing that I want to bring into this, like if it's not a fuck yeah or hell yeah, it's a hell no.
Nice.
Like just let me slide that over to the table.
Don't let your mouth overload your back.
Always.
Awesome. Unless you're already selfish and you never say yes and you're not a giver. In which case
Usually
you
you're
might
not
need to,
watching
yeah,
this.
you're definitely not watching this.
Yeah.
Okay, although you might be, so keep that in mind. Okay, so before we get out of here, we have Relationship Talks virtual event, which I have. Basically, it is turning fights into connection, turning conflict into connection.
Turn conflict into connection. This is going to be hosted at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, June 18th, the third Thursday of every single month. And that one for you and your partner, like what if your fights where you are disconnected and at each other's throats and then trying to figure out like what went wrong? What if you actually had deeper connection after those moments because you learn the skills that Alan and I are teaching?
Well, every time you and I have a challenging moment, we always find a way to do better.
We end up better even after.
Well, sweetheart, I know.
It's
and I
wild.
don't want to come off arrogant here. Yes,
but
we
still.
do. You're absolutely right. Okay. Yes.
I
we
need to show people that it's possible.
I know.
You know?
That's not necessarily going to do it, but it's definitely true. And you told me 6 years ago we're never going to fight, and we never have, which is unbelievable. Where I grew up, literally, where I grew up, that was not a thing. Yeah. But we basically identify the root cause. We both learn. And then we create more connection, and then and this is the important part, I think, get better.
Yeah,
like
skills.
you have to
Skills,
get better.
skills,
Yeah,
skills.
100%.
That's what
All right.
we're going to be teaching.
So
at this event.
Relationship Talks coaching, we have a bunch of different programs. Reach out. The first one is free, 30-minute session, totally free.
We just want to add value.
Yeah,
Service
do it.
Saturdays.
Yeah,
we love working with couples.
These conversations will always stay private and anonymous. We learn so much from our clients, and then we bring that to this podcast anonymously. So again, your secret's safe with us. Just be humble, courageous, and vulnerable. You don't have to show up perfect.
We're all going through these things. Like
every
single one does.
Everyone is. We've coached couples now for 6 years.
Yeah.
There is no one who has a perfect relationship.
Facts.
There are some people who handle conflict well and grow as a byproduct, and they are often our clients. All right? So grow together, not apart. Relationship Talks coaching. Anything you want to add before we go?
It's great.
All right, awesome. I have to go to a coaching session.
Correct.
Thank you for listening. As always, it's not about you or me. It's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Conscious Couples podcast. We love connecting with the Conscious Couples community, so please check the show notes to connect with us and say hello on social media.
If you and your partner resonated with this episode, please leave us a 5-star review at the link in the show notes and share this with someone you love. Until next time, it's not about you or me, it's about the we. We'll talk to you next time.